Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to what I'm sure is one of the highlights of the leadership course, the great debate. I have as my debating team this evening 4 very distinguished individuals who carry with them in total in excess of 65 years of educational experience. On the far right-hand side of the table, we have Father Len Attilia, who for the past 3 years has been the principal of Gonzaga Regional High School and who has spent some 16 years in education, 8 of those as an administrator. Next to him, we have Bertha Taylor. Bertha is presently on leave as principal of Pasadena Primary School. She has a total of 13 years experience in education, 7 of which are in administration. Immediately to my right, we have Mary Craig. Mary is a consultant for the enrichment program at the St. John's Roman Catholic School Board, 20 years experience in education, and has also in that period of time served as the department head in mathematics at Holy Heart. And next to her, of course, Mr. Wayne Russell, currently Executive Director of the Newfoundland Teachers Association, some 20 years of experience in the field of education, 10 of which have been attached to the Newfoundland Teachers Association. Father Attilia and Bertha Taylor are going to be arguing for the affirmative this evening, and Mary and Wayne are going to be arguing against the motion. The topic before us this evening is as follows: be it resolved that today's principle should be concerned more with the vision than the process. You have before you a score sheet, and I would ask you to use that score sheet as the speakers do perform their debating. There is an individual score to be calculated for each of the speakers, and then you can total those to arrive at a total for that particular team. As soon as the debate is completed, I have asked a couple of the graduate students to collect the score sheets to determine who the winner of this debate is. And so you folks will be playing a major role in that determination. While the 2 graduate students are determining who the winner is, we will be entertaining questions from the floor. So if you have any questions after having heard the debate that you would like to pose to any of the 4 speakers, please feel free to do so. We will have Father Attilia leading off the debate. He will speak for 7 minutes. Mary Craig will follow, speaking for 7 minutes, followed by Bertha Taylor, Wayne Russell, each speaking for 7 minutes. And then, of course, we will call upon Mary Craig to have 3 minutes in rebuttal. And lastly, Father Attilia giving 3 minutes for rebuttal. There will be a few seconds, perhaps a minute delay to allow the speakers to confer one with the other. I would ask that there be no heckling from the crowd and no other forms of assistance. We will now commence the debate, and I would call on Father Attilia as the first speaker for the affirmative.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it is incumbent upon the first speaker always in a debate of this nature to clarify the terms that are being used in the debate to ensure that it is clear precisely what we are discussing. In this resolution, there are 3 key words: The first is principle. The principle is to be concerned more with vision than with process. It has been agreed for the purposes of this debate that the term principle shall be used in its traditional sense, but perhaps best cast in the context of the literature on effective schools, in which the term is used primarily to refer to the established leader within the school, the person who exercises primary leadership within the school context. The second major word is the word vision. This shall refer to the primary goal, the self-definition of the school, the mission of the school. And the third operative word is process. And this evening, that term shall be used to refer to the methodology, the action, the implementation, the way things are done within the school context. With all that said, the really most important word in this resolution is the word more. One word that could easily be missed if one were to read the resolution quickly and say, well, the principal must be concerned about vision instead of process. But the resolution doesn't say that. The principal is to be concerned with vision more than process. From that, it must be inferred that the principal must indeed be concerned about process. However, his first concern must be vision. And there are several significant reasons why this vision is of greater importance for a principal than process. In all of the literature that relates to effective education, it is stated repeatedly that what is going to make the difference in a school becoming effective, becoming more effective, is that the principal has a clear sense of what is to be accomplished. Not that the principal necessarily imposes on the institution the final outcomes or imposes on the institution his predetermined sense of what education must be, but rather that the principal has well-defined, clearly understood, explicitly stated, and reinforced goals towards which he is moving the institution. That vision is essential for setting the course for the school. That vision is essential for providing motivation for the staff, for all who are going to carry the responsibility for bringing that vision about, for making things happen. That vision is essential for instilling confidence in a staff that is faced with what can sometimes be the trauma of change. That vision is an absolutely necessary element of growth. For without it, the institution goes around in circles. For without it, the institution has no primary direction, no clear objectives. And it's the principal's responsibility to provide that vision. That vision then provides direction so that the institution can chart its course and can work towards the goals that the institution itself agrees upon to be the mission of that school. We understand that the principal probably is the most significant person in the school context. It has been oft-stated that the principal imposes a character upon the school, that the school reflects the character of the principal, that the school reflects the vision of the principal. If the principal is not exercising that leadership, there is a void. The void gets filled by someone else because we know that a vacuum cannot exist. Some other vision takes over. Some other set of values will supplant the vision of the principal. And that leads to chaos. And that is not to say that the principal must be some kind of mystic visionary who sits in the corner of the room and dreams fantastical dreams about the school. The vision has to be clear, realistic, achievable, manageable. And then, secondarily to that, the principal has to know how to achieve it. And that's why the second part is also important, and that is process. But if the principal doesn't understand the goals for which the institution is striving, the institution will never achieve those goals. To conclude, I remind you that what we are looking at here is the effort of an institution to achieve excellence and effectiveness in education. Not for the principal to impose on that institution some predetermined definition of what excellence is, but rather for the institution itself to grow towards excellence, for which it needs clear and precise objectives. And that is the principal's role, to establish those objectives, to bring to the process a clear vision of what that process is to achieve, so that there can be a profitable and successful completion to the process. And therefore, the principal's responsibility is to concern himself more with vision than with process.
Thank you very much, Father Lynn. I now call upon Mary Craig, the first speaker for the negative.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, we, members of the opposition, agree with the affirmative side that the principal, as an effective school leader, has to be concerned with a vision for the school. That person, the principal, has to know the direction that he or she wants the school to head. But the principal has to be equally concerned about the process in which he or she will use to make that vision a reality. The principal, as leader in the school, sees what is there, sees what is real in the classroom and on the corridors and in the gym, and asks, how can we improve upon this? How can we make this better? He or she examines the school and sees, this is where we are right now, but this is where we want to go. What are the steps that we are going to use to get from here to here? And all of these steps are the processes that the people will use. The identification of these goals is important, and it's also perhaps a good bit easier, and it takes a lot less time. But creating the means to achieve the goals is equally as important as identifying them. Much time and effort could be spent on identifying goals, clarifying goals, and further clarifying goals, which could be time and energy lost to the critical aspect of school, and that is the practical education of students under its care. Schools cannot pause. There is no neutral gear. We have to go on with the nitty-gritty of everyday work in the schools. If principals and staffs could step off the treadmill, vision and planning would be so much easier. But that is not reality. The work of the principal is to keep school moving toward the vision day after day, despite all the obstacles. He or she has to maintain harmony and a spirit of teamwork among all members of the staff and resolve daily problems before they become explosive. He or she has to reach that goal and keep spirits high among members of the team along the way. It's the story of Exodus. Way back in the Old Testament gives us an example of that. Moses had a great vision of bringing the Israelites from Egypt back to the promised land of Canaan. But he knew his vision well, but the process of making that vision, the vision of the people that he was working with, and keeping that vision before the people all the time, and keeping their spirits high in the process was indeed the challenging part. In fact, it took 40 years to accomplish that. I hope that's not an indication to us. It is not too difficult for a principal to sit in his office and wax eloquently all day on the great vision he or she has for the school. The difficulty arises in bringing this vision to reality. It is rare to see a clearly defined vision articulated by the principal and then installed by followers. The principal must take the initiative, must set the agenda, must establish the pace and contribute to the conversation. The work of the principal as leader is communication, active listening, persuading, reassuring, encouraging, cajoling. I one time worked with a principal who was a great visionary. He had wild, new, grandiose ideas. He continuously talked about what the future of education would be like down the road, how great it was going to be. He attended luncheon meetings, dinner meetings, to discuss this with other visionaries. He had no idea what was going on in the real world. He left everything in the school to happen by itself. He had no idea of working with a group and how to get that group to function as a team. He didn't even hear the staff. He thought everything was just great and rosy. But the staff were completely turned off, would not listen to anything he had to say, much less work toward his vision. The principal, as an effective leader, must place equal emphasis then on process and vision. Effective leadership for the principal entails three major aspects, that is, constructing the vision or creating the ideal image of the school. Secondly, developing a mission statement or a philosophy, along with programs and policies to put that philosophy into practice. And thirdly, the process of implementing the vision. Now, look at the first one, constructing the vision. That is rather neat and clean. It is intellectualizing. Once the principal, though, decides to make this vision, his vision, a part of the staff's vision, then process is involved. And process is messy, because you don't know where it's going to take you. It is intellectualizing and it's also emotional. As people work toward a vision, a reality, making that a reality, the intellectual and the emotional have to work together. Vision cannot be isolated and unattached to emotion. It has to be worked through and established through process where people struggle with issues and arrive at their own vision. After a group consensus is made, then, the commitment can be made to work on that vision. Vision also has to be thought clearly through over a period of 3 to 5 years. You cannot just look at your vision and say, by the end of this year, we're going to accomplish it, and then drop it. It's a long, long process. Our own school board had a great vision a few years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, with the colloquium. Some of you perhaps know about it. And that was a great vision. It was a great idea. It got all the people working towards looking at what they're about in teaching. The vision, though, as I see it, was not thought through long enough. It was good while it lasted. There was the process of follow-up and so on was not brought in. The second part of the vision and of the importance here, the statement of philosophy, the mission statement, must then be put into practice by means of actual operational policies and programs. Philosophy has to be articulated through actions and not words, and these are all processes. The process of implementing the vision is through personal practices. There are specific actions in which leaders engage in order to create and support their visions by means of their own interpersonal behaviours, and that is on a one-to-one basis. Without action, visions and the plans to enact them are useless. Principals as leaders are doers. As leaders, they are doers. Their ability to act seems to relate to their competence as administrators and their well-developed people and political skills. They all realize that people are central to their mission. Every action dealing with people involves process. When I was asked to do this at the beginning, I was thinking, oh gee, I really think that vision is the most important thing. But the more I read about it and the more I thought about it, I could see that process was much harder to implement. Great care had to be taken as to how you handle people. It was a much more difficult task, and I'm really convinced that process is certainly equally as important as vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. We'll have just a few seconds pause here while the members for the affirmative undertake some conferencing. It will also give you a chance to look at your score sheets. You'll notice at the bottom of those sheets are the definitions that should be adhered to in terms of arriving at a score for each of the speakers. I now call on Bertha Taylor, the second speaker for the affirmative.
Mr. Chairman, fellow debaters, ladies and gentlemen. The opposition has certainly put forth some very good arguments for process. But I ask you, what type of principal do you aspire to become? Do you want to be a manager who can manage the process? Or do you want to be a principal who is a leader, who through your vision has a guide or a roadmap to lead the process towards a better future for your school, for your staff, for your students, and for society in general? I'd like to take a few moments to discuss and talk about and focus on vision and leadership. We're not just talking from the philosophical point now, we're talking about research, recent research. Manasseh's recent research on leadership, on effective schools, and excellent organizations speaks of vision. Manasseh states, vision is essential. Oftentimes, it is the essential quality of leaders, not process. The essential quality of leaders. Bennis and Enos's research concluded that vision is the force. It's the force that molds meaning for the people of an organization. They declare that leaders are the most results-oriented individuals in the world, and results get action. It's their vision that compels and pulls people toward them. Further studies conducted by Bloomberg and Greenfield indicate that it is the personal vision on the part of the leader, yes, shared with the members of the organization, that differentiate true leaders from mere managers. Yes, managers like leaders know the process, and they have the processing skills. The difference is this: managers do the right things. Managers do things right, but leaders do the right thing. Anthony Riffle says, leadership entails vision as well as action. Leadership is a bond among people. It is not just a process. Through vision, leadership links people in bonds of confidence and mutual respect. Vision in leaders brings out the best in themselves and others through high expectations, through enthusiasm, abundant energy, and the ability to give people the confidence that challenging goals can be met. I'd like to look at programs and the school itself. As we've already said, Father Telia said, vision sets our direction and specifies the path. It's our mission. If that path is not directed and specified, the school's activities, the decisions, the rules, and the policies may contradict each other. Teachers may have conflicting expectations. Students may lack a clear sense of what constitutes appropriate behavior. The public may get contradictory messages. Process not guided by a strong vision causes inconsistencies, it causes confusion, and it causes chaos. Outside groups and agencies may advance their own agendas. Just think of the soft drink companies, the Pepsi-Cola and the Coca-Cola, and their agendas and their ploys of shared profits and scoreboards. Yes, as Father Atilia said, if we don't have that vision, it permits less than desirable practices to creep in our schools because it creates vacuums and voids that will be filled, but they'll be filled by goals that belong to others, that are not in the best interest of our students. Today we heard a very interesting talk about vision and, or not vision, but values. Vision is not easy because it means decision making. It means setting a course towards a better condition for our organization. It involves values, it involves standards of goodness, morals, ethics, and caring. But we know that when we focus our attention through vision, leaders operate on the emotional and spiritual resources of their organizations, the values, the commitment, and the aspirations. It's a stark contrast to the process led by managers who operate on physical resources, the capital, the human skills, the raw materials, and the technology. Ladies and gentlemen, in the absence of vision, or where there's a predominance of process, we may make wrong choices. Now, if we're in a business or a corporation, that wrong choice might be costly in dollars. But in education, wrong choices damage children. Can we afford not to have vision, more so than process? I'd like to look at vision and problem solving and research by Peterson. He examined the problem solving process and its relationship to vision, and he came up with 4 conclusions. Principals without a clear vision in a school with many problems are principals that are firefighters rather than leaders. They are administrators who bounce from one problem to the other. Secondly, in a school without clear vision, but with few problems, they will have the appearance of effectiveness, but actually the organization is stagnant. A principal with a clear vision in a school where there are few problems is an entrepreneur. And fourthly, a principal with clear vision in a school with a lot of problems has the ability to select the key problem rather than trying to deal with everything, the adage of spreading oneself too thin. Peterson's work reaffirms to us that it is certainly a need for more vision than process. Otherwise, we have confusion, chaos, and stagnation. There's not one person here tonight that has not heard of the Effective Schools literature. Literature of lists, direct teaching, and so on. Implementing that process of effective schools. Without it, okay?
Thank you very much, Bertha.
All right.
We will delay just for a few seconds once again to allow the members to my left to the conference. And I'll call on Mr. Wayne Russell, second speaker for the negative.
Mr. Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, leadership is back in fashion in education. As has been said by our colleagues, vision is the new buzzword, and all the literature today on educational leadership speaks in some form or other of vision. Now, we'd be led to believe, if we follow the argument, that vision is therefore the key, and other things must be set aside and become primary or become secondary to vision. If one follows that concept, then I think one sees a person who stands away from the crowd, some person with their eyes focused clearly on the future, and some grand educational ideas dancing in their head. Now, that may exist in literature. I don't think it does, but it certainly doesn't exist in the real schools, at least not the schools in this country, and certainly not the schools in this province. We will accept without reservation that there has to be vision, but the principal is a doer. The principal is an action person. The principal is running a living school. The principal is a problem solver. The principal is at the very front of what is happening in education. If you look at the educational system in this province and ask where does the principal stand in that system, it is those who are at the central board offices, those who are at the Department of Education, those who work with the DECs, those at Memorial, and those of us who work at the head office of the NTA, who are writers and speakers. The action people are the principals. I like a definition of the role of the principal, which one author calls the goose theory. The goose theory. It goes like this: honking and hissing like geese. Faculty, staff, students, parents, central office staff, school board members, Department of Education officials will cruise into the principal's office, ruffle their feathers, poop on the floor, and leave. The principal is expected to clean up the mess. The principal is a process person. Vision, yes, but the principal is concerned with making it work. I read some time ago an article on the great comic Red Skeleton, and somebody asked him, why is it when you hear a funny story or when somebody tells you a joke, you rarely laugh? He said, I immediately asked these questions. Would it fit my routine? Would it work? Would people laugh? Is it applicable to all audiences? And can I make it work? Here is a professional, a true professional, who immediately asks the questions, will it work? His concern is not always with vision, nor equally with vision, in my opinion. His concern is, will the process work? Now, my colleagues might say it's not correct to compare principals to comics. Well, when I was a principal, I'm certain that that's where I was compared most of the time. It was said that the literature speaks always of vision. Yes, it does. I took all the literature available to me, and after I read it through, I decided I would go back and separate it this way. The literature that was written by those who are now active or had been active as administrators, and the literature that was written by those who weren't. When you separate them that way and read the literature, a remarkable distinction occurs. Those who were active administrators and those who are active administrators, they accept vision quickly. But their articles, their writings, is on how do you make it work? How will it work? A lot of you may be familiar with Rod Campbell, who is now directing the leadership process, whatever it's called, at the University of New Brunswick. Rod is one of the people who first began speaking about effective schools in Atlantic Canada, and I have followed some of his writings. I read in the January edition of the NTA Bulletin what Rod had said, and he said this: setting goals is easy, but using them is difficult. And he's right. Rod Campbell is now spending most of his time writing, how do you make it work? How do you make it work? And that's where the principle really is. There are all kinds of people in this world with clean, clear visions, with dreams, with goals for their organizations, be they schools or be they business or be they associations. But there are very few who can translate the goal into action. And we must remember, in schools, it is principals who are action people. It is others who sometimes have the luxury to sit down and dream grand dreams, and from those grand dreams produce writings and things of that nature. Sure, the principal must have vision, but the principal, first and foremost, is an action person. The principal will encounter and solve hundreds of problems each year. The key is to solve those problems with a goal or a vision in mind. But if the principal is concerned about vision and not how to solve the problems which you'll find when you return to your schools the next morning, that principal is not going to be effective. I read as well all the literature that I could find written by those who were pure academics. When they speak of vision, as Mary had said, they rate it usually this way. There are goals, there are factors that lead to the goals, there are strategies to accomplish the goals, and there are procedures and decision makers. When you read them with a clear vision, what you're really reading is an academic who is saying there must be a clear process. And even there, they are aiming towards the fact that there's a clear process. I think the best definition of a principal is a person who brings vision alive. The principal gives life to a vision. The principal is a leader. The principal is a guide. The principal is an interpreter. The principal is the stimulus of the school. But the mistake should not be made. The principal is not, as I would say it, the pearl in an oyster. The principal is the grain of sand about which that is going to be created and designed. The principal is simply the catalyst and the person, hopefully, who can take the school and get the school moving in a consistent direction, putting all the bits and pieces together and making certain the herd moves west. If the principal is out in front of that group, the school will not work. If the principal is behind it, the school will not work. The principal is an action person, and the principal is in the middle. There is no doubt that the principal is a process person.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Once again, we'll provide a few seconds for the members of the two teams to confer with one another prior to the official rebuttal from both sides. You have now had presented to you some 30 minutes of debate during which ideas have been presented. This is now a very critical time for the two teams, as they're now entering into that phase of the debate where they have their last chance to argue in favor of their view and against that of the opposition. I now call upon Mary Craig, the first speaker of the negative, to deliver the last speech opposing the resolution.
The opposition said that the principal has to be concerned more with vision, but we think that it has to be certainly at least equal, if not more, the other way, with process. The opposition talked about the principal with vision has to help people cope with the trauma of change. If there's growth in your organization, there has to be change. Except now the change is coming faster and faster. This coping with change has to be led by the principal through process. He talked about, Father Altilia talked about that the principal would provide direction of vision, but that has to be the whole team's direction and not just the principal's direction. The school reflects the vision of the principal as a good leader, but the principal as leader and with good leadership has to involve vision, management, has to be a doer, has to be an action person, as Wayne pointed out, and all of this is using process. The principal has to know how to achieve it. Father Len said that. The principal has to know how to achieve it. We agree. That's right on, because that's process. If he doesn't, then the whole thing will be doomed to failure. The principal has to know the process, he or she. Bertha mentioned that process was led by managers. Effective principals have to be managers. They have to be managers. They have to be visionaries. They have to be doers. They have to be action people. And all of these involve process, vision included. Wayne said that, yes, you have to be concerned with vision, but you have to be very concerned with will it work for us? How can we make it work? The key, as we see it, to a turned-on school, which is what we are all hoping to have, is turned-on teachers, which leads to turned-on students, which leads to turned-on parents and everyone else in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. I now call on the first speaker for the affirmative to present their official rebuttal. I must remind the speaker, however, that no new arguments may be introduced at this time, but that new evidence may be introduced in response only to the previous arguments.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed colleagues have already admitted, of course, that vision is important by stating that principal's role is to bring the vision alive. This presumes the principal has indeed a vision. And that vision, which our colleagues have attempted to discredit by casting it in some sort of Pollyannish, utopian, wishful thinking mode, in fact, if it's to be effective, must be a clear-sighted promotion of manageable goals. We are not talking about daydreaming. We are not talking about wishful thinking, about sitting in a corner with the feet up on the desk, hoping that the school would change. We are talking about directing change because we know where we want it to go. Vision is not disconnected from the realities of making decisions and solving problems in the here and now. Vision sets the context for solving those problems. It sets the context for making practical decisions so that they are not made in isolation and you end up patching Band-Aids all over small problems, rather than forming a cohesive and well-directed series of solutions to problems directed towards the completion of a clear goal. Yes, principals have to know how to make it work. But I would suggest to you that if you got on an airplane, you can reasonably rest assured that the pilot knows how to make the plane work. What you hope for is that he also knows where you're going. The principal must know where you're going. And he does have to know how to get you there. But if he doesn't know where you're going, you go nowhere.
Thank you, Father Lynn. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes the formal part of the debate. I would ask you at this time to put the totals on the score sheets and to pass them over to one of the table ends. I've asked Mr. Eugene Stagg and Mr. Bruce Shepard, who have been diligently keeping time, to be so kind as to collect those sheets and to bring back a result to us as soon as possible. While they are arriving at the score, we will entertain any questions that members might have. give you just another few seconds to try and put the totals on your sheets and then to hand them over to the two gentlemen who are attempting to collect them at this point in time. All right, the official counters have now left the assembly. If there are any late score sheets, please turn them in. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been presented tonight with some very powerful arguments. I'm just very thankful that I'm not expected to sum up for you what was said. But certainly you've heard 28 minutes of very persuasive argument, followed by a total of 6 minutes of rebuttal. The members of the debating teams at this time would be more than happy to respond to any questions you might have. Don't feel that you have to address a question to members as part of a team. If you would just prefer to address the questions to the group, they will be more than happy to respond. So at this stage, if you are going to ask questions, please come up to one of the two microphones. The silence is somewhat like around my dinner table when I ask for a second helping. Nothing ever happens, but do we have any questions that you would like to ask? We have one brave soul who will lead the way.
Only because you led me, Dr. Treslin, when I was at university. My question is to Father Attilio. In your reference to vision, I noticed that you left one particular group out, and that was a student. I heard you refer to the institution and to the school, but I kind of feel strongly about the fact that students or pupils or the human element wasn't mentioned, and I wonder if you'd care to respond to where that fits for you.
Student is the focus of the institution. If the institution is making decisions without reference to and association with the students, the institution is serving its own needs, serving itself. There is no question that any vision of any institution that purports to be a school has got to be a vision that is directed towards serving the real needs of real people in the classroom and in the context of that institution. The term that we use is student-centered. The vision must be student-centered. Now, that vision gets, let me say, the carrying out of that vision involves, as we've been arguing here, a process within which there has to be a great deal of interplay with all the various constituents of the institution. And part of the principal's vision has to be how to include those people, including the students, in the process to accomplish the goals. So ultimately, if the vision is going to be effective as an educational vision, it must be student-centered. If it isn't student-centered, it's feeding the needs of the principal or the faculty or the institution, but not the people for whom it exists.
Any other major questions? I'm wondering if any members of the two debating teams might want to say anything to the assembled group of a general nature. I realize they have been forced to argue in a set along a set pattern, but perhaps while we are waiting, and until someone else maybe wants to ask a question, I'm not sure, maybe one of the members would like to, or all of them for that matter, add any comments to things that have been said this evening. Mary, is there anything that you'd like to?
Just to say what I just said to my colleagues up here, being involved in this debate, you know, when Dennis phoned and asked me to do it, I was sort of wondering, what am I getting myself into now? But at least it gave me a chance to really think about vision and process as far as school leadership is concerned, and it certainly forced me to read some articles on it, which I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to do that.
All right, Mary, thank you. Wayne, anything you'd like to contribute?
That's me.
I don't like being put on the spot at all. Just one thing, and this has nothing to do with, very much to do with any of the things that we would have read and so on in preparing for this. But it always seems to me that when we latch on to a new concept or a new word, and right now the word in educational leadership is vision, we have a tendency to then begin to give a bad name to something else. And I think right now in administration in Canada, particularly in Newfoundland, the word manager or the word management have all of a sudden gotten a very dirty connotation to it. Don't ever have anybody say about you, you're a manager of the school. Well, I don't see it that way. I didn't see it that way when I was a principal, and I certainly don't see it that way now. You cannot separate those two. You cannot have vision and have goals in mind, have a great design for your school when the toilets are overflowing. And you can't have it when the parking lot is not cleared. And you can't have when the windows are broken. You've got to make certain that the system is managed and managed well. Now, I think the problem with management is that we have given to it the kind of understanding that a school manager is a person who, as in a position of principal, makes certain that come hell or high water, whatever the school board office sends by memo got to be done. That's not a manager, as I would see. That's a person who shouldn't be there in the leader in the first place. But I would like to leave, I think, clearly the understanding from where I sit at least, that a good leader is a good manager. And if you show me a good leader is not a good manager, then I'll show you a school, in my opinion, that's in chaos. And I think that word should be brought back in again and should be used in this proper context, in this proper sense.
Thank you, Wayne. Bertha, do you want to say anything?
As you know, I didn't get that last point in, but I'm going to get it in now. The one thing that I found when I came across reading the literature, and as well this week being here most of the time at Littledale, it really brought in a special focus about vision, and particularly as it related to the effect of schools. And what we've tended to do in the past with the effect of schools is that we've seen them as lists-oriented. The things, you know, like you can pick up any article on effective schools and you can see the things such as improved test scores and monitoring homework and back to basics, et cetera, and that's the way it goes on and on. Now, doing the work of going towards an effective school will make an effective school and it will make an efficient school. But I think that we have to keep in mind something that Dr. Moore said on Monday in his address. You know, we have to have effectiveness, and yes, we have to have efficiency, but we've also got to have significance, because we've got young adults going into the 21st century facing those problems that he talked about on Monday morning, problems such as the nuclear problems, population explosion, the raping of the environment, and so on. And we have in our schools produced some very top-notch people. We've produced some top-notch engineers that have raped those forests in Brazil. We've produced some top-notch people in economics that have enhanced the plight of the third world. But I guess what I want to say there is that, you know, we always got to keep the global in mind as well as just our little school in our little community in our little province. But we got to see ourselves in a global picture as well.
Thank you, Bertha. Father Len, any last words you'd like to impart?
Yeah, as much as I argue for vision, and I do believe in all of that, by the way, I have to agree with Wayne that the principals are doers, and there is no way around it. And I think the most difficult aspect of the role of principal, as I experience it, is being able to maintain a balance between getting caught up in all the little piddly details, like the overflowing toilets and the rest of it, and the little kids bouncing off stairs and God knows what, that you face in the course of a day. And anybody that sits in a principal's office for more than 6 hours is going to be inundated with 1,000 little details where somebody's at the door wanting a decision now. And it drives you crazy. The difficulty is to be able to step back from that from time to time and maintain a sense of where all this is going. And that's very difficult because you get lost in the trivial aspects and the managerial aspects, which are important aspects, because if your school doesn't function as a physical entity well, you've got a very unhappy place. You get lost in that, though. And the hard part is to be able to get a somewhat more objective view of it, that one step removed, so that you don't spend your entire day dealing with crisis management and dealing with all the piddly details, but can maintain a certain sense that if I decide this now for this child or this teacher in this instance, how does that relate to what I want this school to be? That's the hard part. To be able to take that extra second to think, what is this going to do in relation to what I want this school to be? And I find it very hard at times because most times it's not just dealing with this one kid, but you got 4 of them coming at you at once from all directions. I got 2 doors in my office. They come in both doors at the same time, you know? And it's really hard sometimes to separate them out. But I think this vision process question is it's not an either-or issue, ever. Even the debate didn't cast it in that way. It is really a matter of balance, of maintaining some kind of livable, sane balance between the two. And I find that particularly difficult when you get bogged down in all the details. But good luck. I wish you well.
Thank you, Father Len. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the scores are now in. Actually, we ought to have a roll of drums, and I suppose we should have Vanna go across the back here. But we don't have Vanna, and we don't have the drums. I must point out to you that as I had guessed at the outset, the persuasiveness of the arguments were certainly there. The 2 teams have more or less had a neck-and-neck race, but of course a winner has emerged based on the strength of the argument. And I think that's something we have to understand, that it's not so much a winner or a loser, it's simply the strength of the arguments that have been presented. And at this time, based upon the cumulative marks that have been given to us by you folks as judges, very clearly we have the team representing the negative having won the debate by a margin of 100 points. And so Mr. Wayne Russell and Mary Craig have emerged as the winners in this debate. On behalf of the members present, I'd like to thank each of you debaters for your contribution this evening. It's been greatly appreciated. And on behalf of the debating teams, I would like to also extend an appreciation to those of you in the audience for having listened so attentively and for having participated in the scoring process. Thank you very much. The debate is concluded.